Hello, everyone, and welcome to another broadcast with the national candidates, Slate and Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. I have Diane Sayer in the studio and 5 other candidates gathered via Skype on video conference. And we're coming off of a first ever national town hall meeting that we held over the weekend, which was broadcast over this website, which is also coming in the context of an accelerated mobilization, which has only been added to with this recent resolution from Representative Walter Jones asserting the impeachment principle. And we also see a acceleration of the fight internationally. We were just discussing Mr. Jacques Cheminade, who's a presidential candidate in France. So that's the situation we meet here today under, and I presume you have some opening remarks.
Yes, particularly I'm very interested in the fact that Jacques Cheminade had appropriately designated the character of our current President of the United States. I presume that is warm the cockles of the heart of that President of the United States, or warm something of that cold fish. But anyway, I've just produced something earlier this noontime, which is completed, which will stir the cockles of some people's hearts and other organs by other people. That you will enjoy it, which pertains to our general work in the basement. That we're now approaching a point in our work which will be out and will stir up quite a fuss when it gets loose. That we're changing the agenda for the other people, the opposition, and I think that will have an effect. So I think in the meantime, that's where we stand. We are now on the assault, and with the Jacques Cheminade appearance more publicly here in the United States, you're going to see a multiplication of the implications of what we're doing here, right, which will give us the occasion, if we warm our hearts to that objective, that we shall be able to campaign much more effectively, because we'll put ourselves from henceforth, from this day, we put ourselves in a position we're no longer campaigning as individual candidates or local candidates for office. We're going to be campaigning on the basis of being a factor in international politics. And that's the way we have to go. We have, Jacques is operating, we're operating, of course, in Italy in a more limited way, but significant. And in Germany, limited way, but quite significant. Jacques' campaign is dominant in the European scene. We're also, as you will see today, later today, when you see it on screen, on the report, you will see that I'm taking another blow in the direction of dealing with this thing, which you will probably find most interesting. So we're going to change things. We are now henceforth committed to dictating the standpoint from which current events will be viewed. We're not trying to fight our way up to recognition. We're imposing what we represent on people who are no account, such as President Obama, who's notorious but of no account. And we have all these other Republican candidates who are less than useless. So that's where we stand. And we should probably focus the discussion on that phase of the shift in our campaign. We're now, in a sense, dictating the way we will represent ourselves in terms of the campaigns and the way we'll represent ourselves in general in all our work. We're going to assert that we're right and they're wrong. We're not going to explain and try to justify our existence. We're going to say, you've got a bunch of bums out there. None of them is fit to be president. Now, who are you going to vote for? And that should be the way we go at it, the way we specify it. Because you don't wait for somebody to give you a position in charge. If you're really a campaigner, you take charge. But be careful to do it properly and competently. So I think you ought to go at this and give me a response on what I just said.
Well, I can say this morning I was at the League of Cities meeting just briefly in Washington, and I met a number of people, including a member of a city council from North Carolina. And I was very struck because the people from the areas where we are not, the Slate and so on, I spoke with people from several cities that did not know what Glass-Steagall was, which you don't get anymore in New Jersey. Everybody knows what it is, and I'm sure it's the same in Texas, where we are organizing. So people, first of all, were extremely responsive. One fellow from Gary, Indiana, actually had a leather wallet, and he had nothing to write on. He starts writing on the leather. He wrote Glass-Steagall, so he can go home and look it up. He was so fascinated. And they were talking about the cuts that they're about to endure. The guy I met from North Carolina said, you know, because I said Obama had said some time ago he would veto this. It's a life and death emergency measure. And he said, you know, we were all just talking about this. There's no one running for president. Obama is horrible. The Republicans are horrible. And I must say, I think that the two parties are totally out of touch with reality. The population so hates all of the candidates. It's quite striking. And I think unless people are out there talking to them, organizing as we are, they don't realize how pervasive this is.
I see some of the phenomenon so far, unless Bill Clinton changes his tune from what he's been doing recently, he's going to find that his reputation and influence in the United States is going to go down together with the Democratic Party, continuing this policy. Mm-hmm. Because today, I mean, out there in reality, who in earth would want to support the Democratic Party right now? Right. They're supporting Obama, the policies which would kill most American people. I don't think that's a good way to win friends and influence people among the voters. But this is the situation. So we're in an actual vacuum. Many of our people feel defensive because we're not viewed as having the mass base that the major parties are. But the major parties are failures, and the American population knows it more and more. And also we're faced with crises which may break out at any time now, which will shake everything apart. So the point is, the great danger here is that of our own people are encouraged to show humility in the face of those with superior forces and voting forces. And to recognize, yes, they do have the vote right now, but that's what's going to ruin them, because they're going to have to take the blame for having been in charge of this vote. And that is not going to make them at all popular. So our job is to don't be deferential. State the truth, state it enforcedly, and say these guys are incompetent. Bill should be better than he is at this time, but he's not. So Bill's abandoning the cause, which he has done, and the cause was for him as for us against this menace of Obama. His abandonment of that position to support Obama has discredited him. I don't think he realizes how much he's discredited in the popular vote because of his doing that. I don't think that fact is fully caught up with the voters. But you're going to find out the hatred against the Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party, is the current reality of the present moment. And just the fact that the press hasn't shown that, you know what the press is? It's depressing, right? So therefore, that's the situation. And the key thing I'm concerned about, take charge. Don't take charge hysterically or arbitrarily. Take charge. And say, well, the problem is, you may think, I'm not that important in this race. But when you look at the opposition, you realize I'm the only thing you got. And that's the way to do it.
Yeah, well, I think, Lynn, when you actually look at what is the factor, or at least what seems to be the factor in terms of the popular base, it's all of these single issues that you were addressing in the discussion on Saturday, where it's abortion, gay marriage, where do you stand this way, that way, on things that, frankly, the American people don't care about. They're brainwashed to think that these are the most fundamental issues, when in reality they do know what the issues are. They know it because their kids are either living with them or they're living with their parents, or the unemployment questions and everything else. And when we are bringing up Glass-Steagall, I just want to make this point, because we often get this in the field that Obama's for Glass-Steagall, right? Even though we just had this report come out from the White House that they officially denounced it after the polling had taken place and people voted for it and said that they wanted it, and Obama says we're not getting it. Of course, we know why. But then I think what has to be stressed over and over is that if you look at the world in which the universe in which we live in, is being determined by the present, or by the future, and that the future is what is pulling the present forward from this process of development. What we've discussed, or the basement crew has discussed more fundamentally. But when you start looking at the way that where mankind has to go for survival, in terms of the question of Arctic development, NWAPA, space exploration, we have the only policies and on record and have them as a one conception, not as a series of fragmented policies that we've compiled, but as the question of human development. These are the policies that will drive us to the future. So I think if we stand from that standpoint and say this is where we need to be, and therefore this is what we represent, then all this other stuff that muddles politics, the single issues and whatnot, can just be discarded and said, we know the direction to go.
That's true, but that's precisely the point, is to ridicule anyone who's going with these multiple issues. And just point this out again and again. Sucker, hey sucker, what are you doing again? What'd you do in the last election? What'd you get? Where's your single issues? Forget your single issues. There are only two issues, and they will decide everything.
That's absolutely true because, I mean, what you're finding right now in the population is people are hungry for real leadership. For that matter, they're hungry for a solution, for a national policy. And I found it interesting that today there's a Google and Yahoo News alert on my campaign here. And what they say is her campaign, she's calling for the impeachment of Obama, but then they also go through that we have a campaign policy for Glass-Steagall and for NWAPA, and they go through what the whole national platform is. And then they say that this candidate that I'm running against, they just say he's an immigrant, and they don't have any policy for him. So regardless of what people think about the likelihoods of our campaign winning or not winning, they do realize that we have a very unique policy, national policy solution.
Yeah, the point is to get that across forcefully, with fully, brutally, forcefully in treatments. That's the way to do it, because the question is, if the trumpet shall sound an uncertain note, who then will heed the call to battle? That's right from Isaiah. And it's good.
Well, I was finding this at yesterday. The Michigan State Democratic Party had its convention, and I was not finding support for Obama by and large. When I was talking to people about this idea of scrapping all the candidates and starting over by impeaching Obama, a lot of people were saying things like, yeah, we do need other candidates, or hey, that seems like it could happen. So, I mean, this is among the people who have not gotten so discouraged that they've totally stopped attending these types of events. Now, the interesting thing was the district that I'm running in, the chair of the caucus of the district meeting refused to let me speak, saying that I wasn't endorsed by the party, probably not being aware of the fact that that's somewhat of a blessing at this point. And when she was asked and approached to actually put that in writing, she probably realized that that was not a good idea and refused to do it. So anyway, it's I mean, even amongst these there is massive just disorientation, and people would generally just smirk and sort of nod at the idea of getting Obama out, and this war is on people's minds, very much so.
How do you want Obama to cook you? That might be an option. Not very live for very long.
Well, I'll just put out something on on the green policy that we've been discussing, that we have the potential right now to bust through the belief in environmentalism. And that's also been something that's been pretty pervasive in the Democratic Party. I was at an event yesterday where they were speaking about energy policy, and I brought up the idea that, well, what type of economy does your different energy source imply? And the idea that we have to completely transform it with a credit system and Glass-Steagall. And the response in the room was pretty interesting, that once they realized they could get outside of the very small, unoptimistic way of thinking about solar, wind, and things like that, and we could enter a totally higher level of economy, people were completely provoked, even in the Democratic Party. I just thought that we do have the potential right now to really crush the environmentalism and the demoralization associated with it when we put out this notion of a higher level of economy generally.
You'll find a relevant point in just what I've just written, which is probably out in the streets somewhere of things right now on that issue.
Well, I mean, you, in the previous 2-volume paper that you had written, published, and now this one is a follow-on onto that, in the Science versus Oligarchism, you had this whole point about the human mind through a form of communication which is not just language-based, but, as you detailed it, information, command, and control. That idea, the human mind has the power to operate top-down on any process which it commands. And, I mean, the kind of brainwashing that you're referring to, Rachel, with environmentalism is the precise opposite of that idea. And it shows you exactly what the oligarchical principle has done.
The danger here is that you can take this as murder. If you vote for this program of environmentalism, you're going to murder people, and probably yourself. And that's the only way to say it. Because if you what the plan is, the policy, and we can say it, the policy comes from the British Queen. Huh? Mm-hmm. I don't know about the other queens, but we know about the British Queen. And she, etc., has made it clear. The reduction of the human population globally from 7 billion people to less than 1. That is the British monarchy's policy. That is the policy of the environmentalist movement, as dictated to them by the British monarchy. And therefore, what you have to do is destroy these guys. Don't ridicule them, destroy them. Say, are you for genocide against yourself? You damn fool. Huh? Because if you're for environmentalism, you're for genocide. Because you're for reducing. How do you like poverty so far? With environmentalism will give you real poverty. It'll really kill you. What do you want to? You want to kill yourself? Is that what you're voting for, you damn fool? That's the reality of this.
Well, and it's also presented as just another issue, because I think there's really only a very small, hard core of the environmentalists that actually know what it means in policy, right? And then you'll have another layer of people that they have some sort of ideology attached to it. But then the rest is the population, which pays it some sort of homage out of a kind of not sure what, but they pay it some sort of homage. But if you just go after it, they don't actually believe it. It's just like any of these other single issue type things. But we actually found this just from the standpoint up here, obviously in the Great Northwest, we have a very hard core of the environmentalists. But I was at a meeting where they were discussing cleaning up one of the rivers here, which during World War II, Boeing had, they dumped a lot of material into this river, and there was indeed pollution, and they were trying to clean it up. But somebody made the point there that the only place that the areas are getting cleaned up is in the rich white neighborhoods. And then, of course, the other neighborhoods, they're now beginning to clean it up, but he was making the point that the only reason they're doing that is because this is part of a new green policy, which is to shove industry out of the area. And he just, not sort of somewhat independent of so-called environmentalism, but he made the point that this so-called environmentalism is to push the poor people out and he had a certain reaction against that. But anyway, I'm just sort of bringing that up as just it's very skin deep. A lot of this, the environmentalism, it's more of a religious duty people feel like they have to fulfill, even though they don't know why.
That's popular opinion. Let's take the real dirt. Let's take the real dirty side of this thing. Who are the dirty people? They are the professors and similar professionals. The popular opinion is not the source of this thing. It's you find that people whose careers are controlled by the oligarchy enforce that and say, if you want to keep your position as professor so and so and so and so, if you want your book published, if you want to be heard in public, if you want to have any credibility, influence, you've got to protect yourself by pretending enthusiastically to support the environmentalist bullshit. That's where the danger is, and that's where you have to have the attack. The average person is rather open, except the obvious fanatics. But in general, the average person in society does not share that view. You will find, if you go down through the lists, that it's the professors and similar professionals who are pumping this stuff. Not because they believe in it, but because they believe that career depends upon being shown to believe it.
Right.
And that's where the campaign for this. And you just knock out Professor so-and-so and Professor so-and-so and Professor so. Hey, aren't you a faker? Do you actually believe that? Are you stupid or are you a faker? And when you go at the university crowd and the other similar professionals on that basis, you're going to stir up a very interesting fight because people don't like that kind of sycophant, particularly when they are the victim of it.
Right. It's also a lot of money, clearly, because Governor Christie is hardly an intellectual.
I would say no.
But he is definitely green. But it's clearly because there's some kind of payoff going on where the state gets some money, he gets some money. They're putting 180,000 solar panels on telephone poles in New Jersey.
Is probably a tendency toward bloating. They account for this. Is he still able to move under his own power with all that avoirdupois?
He's actually trying to see how much area he can personally put solar panels on.
On himself.
Yeah.
Well, you take him, he goes out naked, but he's covered with solar
Right.
panels. The naked truth about Governor Christie.
Yeah, it is the second law of thermodynamics. The greenie policy is a policy of genocide. It's a policy of mass extinction, and it's very true. These professors, they swear by this, and they live by it because they say that this is what is going to determine my status. This is going to determine my tenure. But they don't understand, or should I say, they've chosen to go along with this, even at the expense of the many lives that it's going to destroy and the many people that are going to get killed from this policy. And so what we're doing in crushing this with the basement team and also just in our organizing nationally, internationally in the field, going to the universities, in the campuses and across the board, really putting this as the forefront of the agenda of our political fight, because the key thing to achieving Glass-Steagall or to achieving the North American Water and Power Lines or the or any of the other projects that we're calling for requires that this enemy to this advancement in human progress be destroyed.
And also to include the list of things, which starting with the WAPA, with what they can represent for society and why they're absolutely necessary, and get that more and more on the agenda. Now, we're going to be stronger on that in the coming days. We are now in the final stages, so we say, of getting a preliminary general draft and report on the WAPA. That will be out fairly soon. Mm-hmm. That will be followed by a second phase, which will be more perfected in a sense in terms of certain details. And there will still be room that required for some other matters which have to be dealt with. But the general picture of NWAPA, its capabilities, its necessity, in fact, is about to become much more obvious because a fulsome report on the subject is being presented. And that's, I think, our major war front on the positive side against this environmentalist crap is that. And this will be coming out very soon in its preliminary form, as you know how that's going. But this is, the positive thing is crucial, and NWAPA does represent the best approach to the positive issues of, are you short of water in the middle states of the United States? Are you still suffering from pollution in California? And shortages of water? Would you like to have a fresh drink of water? Would you like to have some ability to grow crops in the great Central Plains states of the United States? Would you like to have something? Would you like to continue to grow vegetables and people? That sort of thing. So we have all kinds of things if we assert ourselves and don't try to defend ourselves. And just hit them anytime they try to raise a false issue. Say, wait a minute, buddy, are you the guy who's supporting this crap? And just attack them. Attack them on that basis. Don't defend yourself. Defeat them.
I mean, this report is also going to be the perfect way to educate the American people on the credit principle, because it's the credit principle in action, not in abstract.
Well, this is it. This is it. What we have in terms of our policy, no other candidacy, no other political movement in the United States currently has. Yeah. And this is something on which the life of the nation and its people depend absolutely. So therefore we have authority which is based not on opinion but on reality. We're the only ones now, in terms of the whole presidential campaign effort, who is actually speaking of reality. The others are not. Often they're either stupid or lying, one of the two. And that's what we have to emphasize. We have to go at it with a killer instinct. I just see what Jacques did with on Obama. I think that was beautiful.
Yeah.
I think just to reiterate the point that when people cover what we do, they are covering what our policy actually is. And these other guys really don't have any policy. I've run into other candidates myself, people who are running for the same spot, and they don't have any policy. Nancy Pelosi doesn't have any policy. And so I think what you're saying here with the North American Water and Power Alliance and what that means for people in California, as you said, would you like a fresh drink of water? Well, in Eastern California, you're not going to find much water. I guess there's a debate going on about trying to unleash a little bit more water there, but obviously the only solution that's being proposed is by our slate and people who are joining with us. There's no other policy being put forward by any of these other candidates.
Also requires power. The California case, for immediate results, requires more power.
Right.
And that means nuclear power and so forth. And it means other measures which will generate more power. So if they're going to talk about water, they're not going to get any action unless they go into these directions.
Which would mean Lawrence Livermore National Labs is sitting right here to the east. We're looking at fusion power right there. That could be fully funded, and that's something that is piquing the imagination and people are excited about.
Well, that's what we got to do, is we've got to go at this thing as if we were the leading party. In fact, in quantity. We are in quality, so let's also become that in quantity. And take the full load and go after these guys.
I believe that we demonstrated that, and that was demonstrated as a principle of who we are on this past weekend with the national simulcast and town hall that you addressed, because what people had a sense of is that this is not just local campaigns or regional campaigns, but that we represented a real federal slate that represents the interest of the nation, exactly as we've been discussing throughout these discussions, is how do you break from the small issues, from the localized campaigns to representing, bringing the population together, bringing the nation together around one unified purpose. And we gave a clear example that Glass-Steagall and the credit system is going to be the key to unifying the nation. And I know that just from discussions that the candidates have had, we had people leaving from these events who clearly understood that they had a national mission at hand that they had to go and take up. And so I think you're getting more and more of this recognition that we do represent a very unique principle in this conception of what our republic, what our nation truly stands for.
And internationally. Well, I just wanted to throw it's international, that perspective of the international. I mean, really, if you want to talk about quantity, I think between Russia, China, India soon to come on board, Japan, we have billions on our side.
Yeah, sure. We've got to take. You can sit there and watch your troops form and assemble, but who's going to get out there and lead them? Right. And what constitutes leadership? That's the issue. Most people will try to be. They're told, well, be deferential. People will respect you if you're deferential. Mm. Don't make people angry by attacking them. Huh? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. And the thing is to go out with full charge. Look, buddy, I know what you're saying, but you haven't got anything to show for it. You're talking about this, you're talking about that, but you're not going to do a damn thing that's of any good to anyone. So why don't you sit down, shut up, and listen for a while? And that's the way to treat them. You have the authority. You have the honest authority to say this as a matter of truth. You know the information. You know the facts. You don't know all the facts in the world, but you know so many facts that these other guys have no inkling of. And to get out there and take charge and run the operation and say, "Okay, buddy, I heard you. I know you're trying. But you didn't make it this time." And that's the nice way to treat them.
It's always struck me, I mean, the two things that have been brought up in the recent period. One is that the imperialist system will always destroy itself. And I think that is clearly what we're seeing. We've got the policy of genocide, the destruction of whole nations that's been going on for decades now. It's disgusting. And to think anything smaller than what we're discussing here is a total fraud. And one thing that always struck me from the beginning with what we're doing as a political movement is that all the policies that we're proposing would solve these crises. It would solve genocide. It would solve the destruction of humanity. And they're sitting there. We have the North American Water and Power Alliance here in the U.S., but you've got Transaqua in Africa. These are policies that would free humanity from imperialism. And most people who are thinking about these small things, for instance, I'm going to be going and speaking before two of the major gay clubs in San Francisco coming up. And two of the questions that were proposed to me was, one, what have I done? What am I doing to try and what did I do to elect Governor Jerry Brown in California? And secondly, what am I doing to re-elect Obama for President of the United States? And obviously, they're going to get a very interesting surprise when I go and speak at their event on Friday and Saturday, because those are questions that don't matter at all when you're talking about global imperialism and genocide. And I think we have always uniquely had that solution, and it's a very beautiful thing. And I think that going with that as a national approach will have reverberating effects, earthquake-like effects.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole point. We've got it. And when you read today, later, when you get a copy of what I produced today, you'll get some of the fun side of this thing, which I think you'll enjoy.
You know, the population doesn't like environmentalism.
Just to add to...
I'll go ahead. Anyway, they don't like environmentalism, but they also really have been deeply brainwashed, I think, as a result of what you've referenced many times, the assassinations of both Kennedys, the Vietnam War, the shutdown of the space program. So somehow, while they reject certain of the axioms, people do have this somehow underlying doubt that mankind might not be that great.
The only thing for which a former president of the United States was famous was his defense and repeated proposal of the SDI. Despite his whole administration, the one thing that was considered memorable in that administration was SDI. and it now persists to the present day.
Right.
It is actually what the basis of thinking is in Russia, is the SDI. It comes out in the form of the Russian form of SDI, SDE, the defense of the planet, defense of the solar system. And that works. So don't worry about what some people say about becoming popular. Sometimes the worst thing you can be is popular, particularly if you belong to certain clubs. And go ahead with what we've got it. I mean, as far on a world basis with our appreciation of what we're doing among people in China, more notably the leadership in Russia, and now with what's happening in France, a growth in support for what we're doing in Germany and in Italy. Obviously, we probably have a rage-filled basis of support in Italy right now. Yeah. Spain is on the verge of being destroyed. Portugal on the verge of being destroyed. And the British not very popular. So we're in the state of affairs in which we really don't have a problem among ourselves in what we're doing, except being more efficient and more effective in the presentation of what we have to say. That's all. And that's where the weakness lies. And the weakness lies also in many of our associates in the organization, that they don't have that kind of confidence. And therefore, the leadership of the candidates has to take also the form of being the leadership of the members of the organization. The members of the organization not only have to campaign for themselves, they have to campaign to get their own membership, their own supporters, effectively mobilized to do an effective approach to supporting the campaign. It's an assertive one. Take the flag, hold it up high, present it forward, and tell people, this is the flag, salute it.
But I think people can be inspired if they address, as you have addressed, this conception of living in the future, of knowing that you're fighting for the future and you're not fighting for something in the moment. You're not fighting for an election campaign or something immediate, but that you're fighting for what is going to be your immortal contribution to the next generations, to the children, grandchildren, and those who have not yet been born yet. And I think that our fight and our existence, if we actually have that, which none of these other candidates, presidential candidates or candidates for Congress or anything else, they don't have this. They don't have the conception of this principle of what it means to actually truly live for the future or in the future. And so that's the unique quality of what our slate and our campaign and our movement, for that matter, actually represents. So people shouldn't have a problem with that if they can understand that conception or start to understand that conception.
Well, obviously you guys do.
Right.
Yep.
That's good. That pleases me mightily. And I shall do my best to help you in continuing that progress toward that goal. And I hope that what is going to print today in circulation, when you read it through and think about it, will please you.
We look forward to it.
Yep. I bet it will.
It will. It will. I'm sure you'll love it.
Yes, I think it will.
Okay, so we'll have fun and others should too.
Yep. We're going to have fun.
Okay, so we have a lot to anticipate, so we can conclude here. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching.
And keep it up.